Meeting of the Humboldt Waste Management Authority. Could we have roll call, please?
Pereira,
Here.
Hogan,
Here.
Castellano, Sweeney,
Present.
Bone, Wilson.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is the consent calendar. All matters under the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the HWMA Board and will be acted upon by one motion unless a specific request for review is made by a board member or a member of the public. The consent calendar will not be read. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless polled for discussion. Does anyone in the audience wish to poll an item from this evening's consent calendar? Seeing none, is there anyone on the board that would like to poll an item from the consent calendar?
No, but I would like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Very good. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is oral and written communications. This is time to provide for people to address the board or to submit written communications concerning matters not on the agenda this evening. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak or submit written communications on an item not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item 4, receive presentation outlining independent auditors report fiscal year 2018-2019 to be filed with Authority Archives, State Controller, and required financial institutions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This evening, we are asking that the board receive a presentation from Tyler and presenting the auditor's report for fiscal year 2018-19. We will then be asking that the board authorize us to move forward with filing the necessary, or the report with the Authority Archives, State Controller, and Comptroller, and the other required financial institutions. In addition, we are going to be asking that the board authorize the reduction of the rate stabilization reserve by $70,000 to reduce to actually address, the finding on 2019-01 with respect to our loan agreement with Chase Bank. I'm going to have Tyler delve into some of the details there, but that's the action that we are asking for from the board this evening.
Thank you. So I'll go over a couple of quick items just about the audit in general, and then I'll dive into that finding that we had this year about our debt service ratio and why we're reducing the reserves. I think the key takeaways from this year's audit are that authority activity is extremely stable. I was actually just looking back to remind myself how long we've been doing this, but this is our 5th fiscal year without any rate increases that this audit covers. And you'll notice in the numbers as we go through a couple of them that everything's just remained stable. We've been looking for a period of kind of collecting our breath after closing landfills and not knowing if we were going to be able to afford to close landfills, and addressing burn sites, and a number of things that had come up in our past that we've all tackled pretty admirably, I'd say. And I think it shows in our financials that stability has been pretty important to getting that done, but also making it kind of a smooth transition into a new era. We've almost eliminated our long-term debt that we accumulated from the very beginning of HWMA itself. And that's a very exciting time for us. We're going to have some big decisions to make for future planning. We're going to have a lot of funds to utilize in different ways other than just paying a loan bill. And it's a good time to be looking forward to the future. The stability also just means that there's been an overall increase in authority health, which was a big challenge in the past. And we are positioned as we move into that future planning to actually undertake it without making any sort of unnecessary strides that will reduce that health. It's nice to have a good cash flow. It's nice to have full reserves. And in general, we've had a number of positive relationships with our vendors for long-term debt instruments, for some of these big projects we've done. And it's really positioned the authority to move ahead in a much less rocky fashion than we've seen in the past. I'll touch on a couple of other things, but just to go back to what Jill was saying, the issue with our debt service ratio, there was one finding this year. If you turn in your board packet to page 89, you'll see that finding 2019-01, it's the first finding of any significance at all that we've had in a couple of years. And it simply states that we did miss our debt service ratio on the Chase Bank loan. In years past, that was a bigger issue than it is these days. We had to keep our earnings at 1.2 or 20% over the debt service cost year to year. These years, that's approximately $800,000. So we needed approximately $960,000 to $1 million in earnings to meet our debt service for our long-term debt instruments. When these were bonds, that was a very hard floor. If we went below it, it triggered a number of steps that we had to take. We had to immediately raise fees to prove that we were covering that loss. There were a lot of things that happened because, of course, bondholders were interested in whether or not they were going to get their money back for the bonds that they held. One of the benefits that we have today is that the Chase loan is privately placed. When we went out for that, the board, through our bond counsel, Cameron Wiest, approached a number of banks about a loan. That is essentially what we have, is a loan for the remainder of the long-term debt. And so the debt service ratio that we have with Chase is just a floor for the purposes of making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. I've been talking with Mr. Wiest about what happened. This is a small miss. It's about $70,000 when you look at the numbers. And so he's looking into the next steps that we'll need. They're pretty small, and one of the first steps that we'll do is we'll just reduce the reserves that we hold on hand to free up that operating cash if we need to move it. But he's fairly confident, and I think we all share this belief with the staff, that is, that we'll let Chase know what happened, and we'll let them know that it was a one-time thing. It resulted from a number of expenses, mostly related to stormwater mitigation, stormwater litigation, and some other projects that happened along with that in terms of getting the transfer station caught up on a lot of its stormwater compliance. Those were one-time things. We've addressed all of them. We had that big project that just wrapped up to put in those additional clarifiers and sort of reroute where some of the stormwater is going. All of that stuff is literally what we spent money on that we hadn't anticipated. And it happens to be that we're running such a well-oiled budget that missing the mark by that much was enough to put us under our debt service. So we'll let Chase know that that's what happened. With the term left of approximately 2 years on that long-term debt, we don't anticipate them making too much of a stink about it, especially because it will be a one-time thing. We're making sure this year that the numbers are looking a little bit more solid as we head into the second half of the year. And so I don't anticipate there being any issues. But it is a finding. It is worth calling out, especially in communication with the board, so that you know that we are aware of it. And that is part of what the audit is for. That's why the auditors are looking at this information. More importantly, that is the only finding they had for this year. We had a very smooth process with the field work. We even endured half of it during public safety power shortages. So we had all sorts of adventures this year, and it came through fine. They had nothing bad to say about the work we've been doing, and we're still really pleased with the product we're receiving. I will point out in a couple of other places, if you go back to page 51 in the board packet, this is the balance sheet for the authority for fiscal year 2019. This kind of goes back to that idea that things have been very stable. You'll notice that in our current assets, the very first line, cash and investments, it's a change of about $100,000. In other years, that number has fluctuated wildly and in either direction. The same goes for smaller things down at the bottom. The net investment in capital assets, that's up. We're increasing the value of what we hold, which has been a problem for a while. We're seeing even small decreases in our unrestricted net deficit. As we can get that down, the authority gets healthier and healthier. And that is almost all entirely the result of our long-term liability for post-closure maintenance, which we are currently handling with minimal effort. Staff is doing a phenomenal job up there. The money that is needed for it is being tightly controlled and budgeted annually with no problems, and reserves are on track to handle anything that might surprise us up there. So those are pointed out simply to show that they haven't changed that much or have changed positively. And that's what we're seeing across the board. Even when there are these small fluctuations and when we are running this tighter budget than we used to, we're seeing very positive gains in everything that we're doing. So really appreciate the rest of staff's assistance as we manage this. And of course, the board's decision making is solid right now. We are all moving in the right direction. I don't have a lot more to add to that because when things are stable, I don't have a lot to talk about. But if you have any questions, I'm available. And Jill, if you'd like to add anything.
And that concludes the report.
Okay, great. And thank you, Tyler and Jill. Is there anyone in the audience has a comment or questions? Seeing none, is there anyone on the board that has a comment or questions?
Tyler, thank you for that overview. I mean, every time I see an audit, it's always just really great to see that overall they're pretty straightforward and clean, and that there's not really findings. So in this case, I know like anytime we get the quarterly financial reports, they're very thorough and detailed. Could you just make sure that if there is something that comes up with Chase, if there is like a fine or something like that, that it's just noted in the report of that quarter?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
In the March meeting, you'll be updated on what Chase's response was and what we had to do to move from there. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
And on the, all right,
Mhm.
Yeah.
on the debt with Chase, I mean, basically the finding is just basically the security of the debt. We didn't miss any payments. We didn't anything
No.
else.
That's
So
correct.
there's no fines. There's no penalties. There's no anything else. They just want to make sure the debt's secure as they pawn off the loan.
Yeah, there are some steps that could happen if we were truly below our debt
Yeah,
service.
no, I
There are some
understand.
things that automatically trigger that we would have to address, but we've never missed a payment. We have more than enough money in reserves. It is a simple matter of fact of talking to Chase and saying, we've set this limit, we kind of missed it. Let's just put that on your radar. So we don't anticipate, there's no fines that are immediately levied or anything like that. So we're doing good.
And what kind of, when we get to that debt relief in 2 years, will we be able to maybe look at our rate structure then? Is that a possibility, or?
There's
You
a
know, lot
number
times people
of
wanna
there's a
spend the
number
money
of
on those, yeah.
possibilities that we'll be bringing to you at that time. The world could change tremendously. So right now we're anticipating it'll be a relief of a little over $800,000 a year that
Yeah.
we're currently paying out. So there are some things that we're planning to bring forward to the board. So we'll be looking at a wide array of different options that we're going to be asking the board to consider. So we're not prepared to talk about those, which is why I'm being a little vague
You be
on
as,
that.
you be as vague as you want, but
Yeah.
my 20% I would like to see the separation be, I know we have improvements we have to make, and we have made improvements, and we've
Right.
been able to do it. But I'd also look to see if we could, somewhere in there, find some way we could lower our rates to.
So it's going to be entirely dependent upon the direction that we receive from the board in terms of the different projects that you want to take, for us to take on or not. I mean, that's what it's going to come down to, because projects are going to have to be paid for. So, we will have more detailed conversations at that time. But certainly, if we were going to be taking on a larger, let's say, a capital improvement project, which is really significant in the terms of millions of dollars, we will still be able to do that without increasing our rates from the current place where it is right now. I would remind board members that we are also currently the lowest disposal site in terms of cost in Humboldt County.
That's not a bad thing, though.
No, that's not a bad thing, but
That's
I'm
where
just
that's
letting
where-
you know.
Hopefully
that's where we are now.
As board members, I'd hope that's
Yeah.
where we all want to be.
That is absolutely it. Absolutely.
Okay.
I would like to just add one more thing. When Tyler was going through his list of the larger than normal expenditures, of being primarily the landfill closure as well as the burn site, the other large significant component, which really positions us for the future, is addressing a lot of the deferred maintenance that had been incurred at the Hawthorne Street Transfer Station, as well as replacement of our rolling stock. So in the purchase of the large heavy equipment, we've just acquired that in the last couple of years. That positions us well for the next 5 to 7 years for those. So there's been a lot behind that very simple kind of statement, so I do want to call out the deferred maintenance in addition to our rolling stock, because those are pretty significant expenditures. So,
Very good. Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is fiscal year 2019-20 mid-year review, receive report, and approve recommended adjustments.
and so this is our mid-year budget adjustment for fiscal year 2019-20, and Tyler is going to be giving this presentation as well.
I will cut this one even shorter. Along with the audits having very little to talk about because things are so stable, our budget estimations and our spending have become a topic of a big topic amongst our directors. And so a lot of the spending controls that have been implemented that make the audits look so good also make the budget work better. It's more efficient, it's more representative of actual estimates of activity that we anticipate through the year. And so the report in front of you that starts on page 91 has a very, very small list of things that we are requesting to increase. These are all basically housekeeping changes, things like some of the money that we need to spend in alarm and security expenses. We've been dealing with some consistent encroaching on our property from some of our neighbors, and it's taken a little bit of effort to slow that down. And so there is some additional cost there.
After our encroachment.
Fully understand, but that's not a false alarm. But
We are working on actually
because
reducing
what
some
I'm saying
of
is
that.
they have a false alarm policy, if I remember, because in
Yeah.
the city of Eureka, but they don't charge if it's not a false alarm. So if we have somebody on the property, that's not considered a false
We're
alarm.
working on that. So some of that is going to reduce this cost. Sometimes it is just a false alarm based on if we're dispatching a lot and it turns out to be a cat rather than people on site. We're reviewing the video on a regular basis to make sure that it's an actual alarm versus false alarms. But when they're false, there's not much we can do about it if we've had a significant number of encroachments, day to day.
No.
So it's definitely something that we're confirming and reducing some of the cost on. But during high season incursions, it is going to relate in sometimes cats getting police called on them.
Yes, that was my suggestion, was a German Shepherd or two.
That might work. We might have a mascot at some point.
I can tell you from doing that aspect, the liability on that is even more extreme.
I'm a little worried that Rex is the one that had to caution everyone on that, and not me. But okay, thanks, buddy. I appreciate that.
I have 11 acres out in the middle of the woods that everybody likes to break into.
The rest of them are small things. So there are increases in janitorial and software expenses for just ongoing monthly costs that have increased slightly, or equipment that we've replaced and weren't anticipating as part of the plan. This is why the mid-year budget exists, for these small changes. And then we do have some extra legal expenses that went towards stormwater mitigation and some of the work during that process, which I believe you're all aware of at this point. I won't belabor this too much. We do think that a lot of these increases are going to be covered by increases in tonnage. It does appear as if our estimations of about 75,000 tons are going to be short again. Between the Humboldt or the Hawthorne Street Transfer Station and our two satellite facilities at Eel River and up at Humboldt Sanitation, we are just seeing more tonnage come in. The reporting continues to get more accurate as to what is our tonnage or is due fees on our tonnage, and our partners at Humboldt Sanitation and at Recology Eel River have been phenomenal at improving the reporting and working with us. So that just results in more fees, mostly passed through, but we will see a small amount in increased revenue, which we anticipate will offset these small charges. So that list is before you. We didn't, as with last year, we didn't include the budget again because it's just a lot of information for such a small amount of change, but I am available for any questions you might have.
Very good. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Seeing none, does anyone on the board have a question? Yes.
Just the 10,000 on janitorial, which is like 1/20th of 1% of what we spend on operations and maintenance. But did we acquire more offices that are requiring this, or are we just being cleaner? Or?
That's actually it. We're actually being cleaner. We have
No, we're not being cleaner. We're having somebody make us cleaner.
Oh,
No,
no, we're
we
making
actually
ourselves
do it.
cleaner. So the best part about the authority is that currently we do a lot of our cleaning in-house. But the funny part is we've become more efficient with where our staff is, and so they're utilizing more materials faster than they used to. And so it's just the cost of going through cleaning materials and making sure that everything is being handled accurately.
So when he's saying that there's, more material that may be used, is because we've got folks on a rotational shift in order to take care of the cleaning of the facility in general. So restrooms are cleaned by our employees, the common eating areas, the break rooms and whatnot like this. So we have everybody basically taking turns at doing the cleaning.
And just using the facility more.
Right.
That is actually
Yeah, that is
another part of it, is just more people using the facility more on our end. Our personnel used to kind of be on their own when it came to breaks and lunches, and now that everybody is a little bit more homogenized in terms of where they rest and do their rest periods, we're seeing just an uptick in the use of materials.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? All right. So,
I'd like to make a motion
yes.
to approve the submitted list of budget transfers and adjustments in the amount of $75,000.
We
for
have
this-
a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is to receive a curbside recycling presentation by Linda Wise, Recology Humboldt General Manager.
Hello, could you help me with the podium, please? Is there a doodad there? I think there's a, otherwise I'll act like, I feel like I'm on Price is Right. Okay,
that?
that's good.
They have these in Ferndale too. That's why he knows how to run it.
Yeah, but hang, yeah.
Okay, just to make sure, it's the arrows that, on the doodad. Okay, all right. Thank you. With that bit of business done, I'm Linda Wise, General Manager of Recologies up here in Humboldt County. And I'm here tonight to present on the 2018-2019, well, actually just the first year of recycling processing as Recology started to take over doing the processing for much of Humboldt County. And my objective tonight is to give you a broad brush on some items having to do with the highlights of what's happened over the past year. And because, you know, we had long discussions about having the recycling processing fees, and so it's good that we let you know what's happened over the last year. And also start talking about where the destinations, what's happening to the materials once you put them in the can and after we've gone through the process, and kind of give a little bit of kind of a little insight on where the markets are going right now. Are they improving? Are they getting worse? Are they staying the same? And talk about what's going to happen next in the next year. So the big news was back in 2018 that recycling started back at the Samoa facility on September 5th, 2018. I included these two pictures. Some of these are for my own entertainment. I'll tell you, I take these pictures myself, and it's hard for me to follow Jill with her pictures on these presentations. So please understand she's a professional with it. So anyway, some of these, this photograph here, it kind of shows that it was kind of the day of operations. You know, we had our heart out in the front. You know, it looks beautiful out in front. But boy, there's the back end. Man, that stuff really piles up. So we started the processing at this facility, and it had that what you're looking at is when, you know, the way it was when we took over, and it had the old processing equipment there that had been there that took care of just a very limited amount of material. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But it had some issues, and so because we had some time before our processing agreement went into effect, we got put into another queue with getting some construction done. So it caused some things that I'll talk about in a minute. So basically what we've been doing over the last year is we've been on kind of a journey to understand what the material's like and what's happening. And what's helped us with that is that we stopped mixing jurisdictional materials in any of the Recology mixed loads as far as at our collection. It used to be at one point, you know, we used to do, you know, because it was convenient for County and Rio Dell and Ferndale, just because they were around with each other in some areas of Fortuna, that there was a proportion that was kind of applied to the Eel River materials. Now we only pick up Ferndale. We only pick up the County. We only pick up Arcata. So we know exactly how much the tonnage is. And what we also did was we started to do these things that were, we call them audit surveys. They're kind of like a same kind of thing, but they're basically mini characterizations of the material that are coming into the facility, like what Cascadia is going to be doing. It's just a matter of weighing what's coming in. You do a grab sample, you weigh that, you sort, and then you tear everything apart, and you see what's in there, and then you calculate percentages so you can figure out what's in each jurisdiction's, what's representative of that. And it's a big kind of a long involved kind of process, and it takes a lot of space. So there's not a lot that you can do in a year. So we'll talk more about how many we did. But we perform those at the front end of the process. So this is when it's coming out of the truck. So I think that's kind of an important thing that we're going to have to retain when we talk longer onto this. We also do that because mainly those audits is because we're checking to see where we also were in comparison to what we thought we were looking at when we first started talking about the agreement, because we're going to be talking about checking our, you know, how much things cost in the future. And we also use those are quantitative studies, so we also use those for CRV payments from the state. They're required to do this, and so this gives us an idea of how much money and material is in there. So the state uses this to say, this is how much we're going to give you back from the CRV that's been paid by the customers. The qualitative studies are done on this program called Go Canvas, and I'm going to show you what examples of these in a minute. It's sort of like an eyeball of looking at the load. So you can look at an entire load, and you can kind of take your cell phone out there, take some photographs, and make some kind of qualitative studies on what the material looks like to kind of give something like, well, this load is really good. You know, this is an area where we're not going to have to concentrate on on communication to the customers. Maybe this neighborhood might be okay, but this other neighborhood needs a little bit of work, so maybe we might want to do a little bit more focus or some communication with the haulers or the collection people to see if we need some work on that. So what we looked at, what we collected last year and processed last year were 12,624 tons of the participating member agency's material. In addition to that, we also processed non-HWMA contract material. So then that was 4,500 tons more or less, and came from the city of Fortuna, Del Norte County, Ashland, and some other state contracts. So state contracts don't fall under the franchise agreements. They contract for their own services. So that's like HSU and schools and things like that. So that's what came in there. That material really helps a lot, I will say, because it helps keeps it's been wonderful, particularly in the case of Del Norte and Ashland, because it's been helping a lot, just this whole circular movement of not just recycling, but also waste in the county, because we've been able to take advantage of some hauling costs of some materials going up to the landfill in Oregon and being able to bring materials back. And it's been good for Oregon because they didn't have a place to process their material too. So this circular arrangement between ourselves, Oregon, Del Norte, the Waste Authority, and the trucking companies has just been wonderful. It's been working out really well, and it's been reducing costs just for everyone. And it also reduces costs in the processing as well. So it's good to have that number. We want to get that number as high as possible. So where are we in comparison to what we projected when the RFP came out? When the RFP came out, it projected that there was going to be 11,244 tons of material, and you can see where it was lined out by jurisdiction, how much was going to be projected by that. The number actually came in higher by about 1,400 tons. I gotta say, Rex, you gotta go to your county areas. You guys look at that. You're only off by 1 ton.
We're slacking.
God, look at that! Wow.
Quit putting trim in there.
Maybe.
There's money in it now.
Yeah. But you can see we were off pretty significantly in the city of Eureka, but we were these are the tonnages that the ones on the left were the ones that we used in most of the jurisdictions for rate determinations when we went in for the rate reviews. City of Eureka, we did advise them before they went in for rate reviews that we think you're a bit light. So they did come in at 5,000 tons. So when they went into a rate increase, so that's good news. So this is an example of what on the paperwork that we send to the Waste Authority in our monthly reports as far as a qualitative study on the material. It kind of gives you kind of a bit of a breakdown of what one would look like. It tells you, just how much is in there, like 5 pounds of aluminum cans. I know that sometimes we hear there's a perception like there's all kinds of aluminum cans in there, and that just gives you an idea of what's in there. 5 pounds, and you're getting 41 cents a pound right now. There's not a lot of money in that. So it kind of gives you an idea of, what is in there. And 23% is pretty high contamination of trash coming in coming into the system.
Depending on the route.
Depending on the route, right. So this is a route, and this has the route. It tells us which route it is. So this is just a sample of one route.
Quick question. Our goal again for reducing contamination, was it like 8%?
Yes,
Okay.
it's 8%.
Okay.
That was our goal.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. This number is just incoming. So the outgoing is a total another story about this. So this is what an example of what, I know it's small on here, but I wanted to show you what one looks like. This is the Go Canvas report. This is what it kind of looks like when we're kind of taking a gander of an eyeball of what the material looks like. And then it will spell out what kind of things that we see in there. You might have, you know, trash, clothing, those kind of contaminants that are in there. So we'll spell it out. And there's a little guide down at the bottom that talks about whether something's good, acceptable, marginal. So it's sort of a guess of what % contamination is in that load. It's just the person that's doing it's best judgment, and we try to use the same person and be consistent about it. So what do you see? Well, here, this is worst case scenario. What kind of contaminations do you think? All kinds of things you don't expect. Yeah, you know, you do see guns on the sort line. There was one on these. These, you know, they don't. You are not going to see one of these in a load check. It just is going to get on a sort. It's just going to get on there. And that first one on the left was one day, and that was shortly after we started the processing agreement. I sent the picture to Jill, and she said, "Wow, that's something." And I said, "Yeah, possibly would never happen again." But then just like within a week later,
Yeah.
that other gun was in there. And I got to tell you, they were all loaded.
And I told her, I said, you need to start keeping these pictures because nobody will believe it.
Yeah, and it has happened again. And so that's the worst case scenario, okay? But sometimes it's kind of good stuff. Not everything that's a contamination is bad. There was $24,000 found on the sort line. The guy that lost it did notify us, and we got a significant amount of news over that. But he did notify us to put it in a shoebox, and his wife threw it in it was in Ashland. But yeah, that's good contamination. Yeah. Yeah. You got it back. But this is kind of the typical kind of contamination that we're seeing that really is a problem that's causing more issues on the back end of what our residuals or trash that's coming out of the back end. Those are half-full containers of materials. And if I'm sure that Paul Newman is rolling over in his grave because he was an environmentalist, and I know that his balsamic vinegar dressing is getting over all kinds of recycling and fouling it. So that's the kind of thing that comes in that causes problems in the back end. So many times that stuff just gets in those bottles and it gets squished and it fouls everything. So you may see that you've got a really good % contamination on the coming in, but as soon as it gets squished on the thing, you're going to end up coming on the back end of the process. We're going to end up with 30% garbage on the back end as a result of stuff like this. So this is the reason why we're talking a lot about having clean containers, at least not having full containers. So here's an example of the incoming material where you guys are at your jurisdictions for the % contamination. And these are the qualitative numbers. So over on the right, that's where you are. Based on, and I got to tell you, the sample size is really, really small. And so I'm not sure that we're able to really pull much from this because of the data. The one thing I want to say about Arcata, Sophia, is that one of the things that we took 4 samples and most of them were like close to the summertime. And the reason why we found really good practices in Arcata during the summertime, and I don't know, I'm just going to make a guess that it's because there's not as many renters, and it's hard to get information about correct recycling, because especially if they're coming from other outside the areas and they have different practices. So that's my guess is what's happening. And I think the other thing is because Arcata had been with the recycler locally for a long time, the people that lived there already had it down. So that's a guess. I don't know. I just throw a lot of inferences there. I put a little asterisk on the city of Eureka. We had one of the things, we've had a lot of conversations with your staff, about contamination, everybody's staff, what's happening out there. And the city of Eureka took the time to go out on the route with our recycle drivers to see what it was like, because we were communicating to them about, we've got this particular neighborhood was of concern. And as in the part of the collection contract, we were communicating to them about the customers about what the problems were, and we had left several notices with them. So we thought, okay. So they rode along with us, and we left what we call oopsie tags, which tells people what the problems is in their cans, and we left them. And that particular route, they were at 23% contamination previously, and it went down to 9% by leaving the cans. And we told everybody, if you want to clean them out, we'll come right back and get them. We just need that stuff out of there. We take the time to come and get them. So it works. I don't know if that's it, but we tried it as a something. Anyway, I don't know if any of you have any questions about this. Okay, I'll keep going. So in comparison to the material that when we were preparing our numbers initially, I'm just going to pull out a couple because this list was a lot longer when we were having our detailed discussions, but I wanted to show you the differences by the RFP estimates and what we are actually measuring. Glass under the RFP measurement was 23.5%, and we actually measured that it was closer to 16%, leaving around 7.5%. That 7.5%, well, I'll go on. 55%, you think it's pretty close to what we actually measured with the fiber and OCC, with a cardboard and paper. Trash, we estimated 15% and went over by about 2.2%. All of those numbers those are the larger pieces of what the entire pie is of that number that we're going to be looking at revising this year. And they are going to be significant factors in that. Glass in that case, because glass, when you don't have glass, you don't get the CRV payment. And that's going to figure in there. So if glass isn't in there, then the state's going to reduce that amount. Fiber, same thing, that's a big portion of it. And now that fiber isn't getting as much money as it had traditionally, 2% is going to make a difference. And of course, trash, because we know how much that costs. The other big thing that happened our year is we did the retrofit and on the line, because the current line that we got from the purchase was not able to handle the material, the amount of material, and bring it to the quality that we needed to be able to make it marketable.
Back to the previous one. Is that all right?
What's the question?
A plastics one on there.
She wants to interrupt the presentation.
Oh, certainly.
Do you have any?
Yeah, she should be at
You
the
wanna
mic.
step up to the
Maybe you
mic?
should wait
Yeah.
until the
Okay.
presentation.
Okay.
The retrofit, again, because it took us a while because of the process with getting the RFP together. It took us a while to get it together. We got behind the list on there's only like one or two contractors that put in these things across the country. We had to have this stuff specially made for here, and it took us a while to get this put in. So between the time of when we started the recycling processing and getting this thing in, we did what we could with the material to process the stuff that was coming in, and we squirreled that stuff away and held it aside while the recycling, while we were getting the recycling equipment put in. But I think we did a pretty good job. It was a really difficult thing to do, and we didn't really get over it until July of this year. But anyway, what this equipment included was an improved paper line, because the screens that were in there were not made for paper. It was made for a container line, and we also put in a glass cleaner system. And so there was a lot of moving about, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. This is the paper line, and it's beautiful right now. It's creating a quality of paper that is just amazing. The glass cleaner, if I like to do my impression of what the machine does this, like it goes like this, and the paper goes up over the side. It's all mechanical. It goes like this and like this, and it's just an all mechanical with screens and stuff. And so the paper goes up over the top, the glass gets crushed, and it goes off on its own line, and the containers go off onto another line, and then people pick and sort. It's amazing. It's all done by hand. Where we cannot afford robotics like San Francisco.
Is there air injection that makes the paper go up? Do they?
No, it does it by itself. It's just the mechanics of it moving up and down. It's sort of like a floater. It floats it up. Yeah, they call it that. Yeah.
Agitation.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's mechanical. So, the thing with robotics isn't going to work for us because we just don't have technical support up here for that, and it's very expensive. So this has improved the efficiencies quite a bit. When we were doing the current line with the amount of material that was coming in, we got about 4 tons per hour because we had to run it twice. That's what our average was. And we got to the height of 12 tons per hour in August. So that is a lot better, as you can see. So we handle more material that can be processed, which over a shorter period of time, so it's going to lower overtime. It just has a wonderful outcome. The material is much, much, much cleaner. The ONP means it is an industry term for a grade of paper that is the highest grade of paper to market out there. It's used for newspaper. And before it was just, we were selling it as mixed paper. That was the amount was like $2.50 a ton when you consider 20 tons on a truck. A difference between that and $40 a ton makes a big difference. Glass is also of a better quality, that we're able to get more money for that too. We're also able to make better use of our hauling to the people that process the glass because it's crushed and so there's no airspace in there, and so we get more tons in the truck to go down at once with fewer loads going down there. Well, the whole process has improved safety because people are not touching glass anymore. And if there's needles, the mechanical process is having it to a point where it gets all crushed up and you don't even know that a needle is in there. So there's no human contact with that kind of material. I mean, it might be over some of the line, but it's not at the point where somebody is going to have contact with it. So that is all really good stuff. We've done some other things this year, like a lot of outreach and presentations, and it's been quite amazing, the events that we've done. After the sort line was put together, Jill and I felt like it was unfair for us to open it up for the public for a public event and a tour without having our own employees go there, and it really worked out great because now our employees are all able to really understand the process of after the can recycling and be able to speak to it by personal experience and feel very valued with them being able to see the new toy before anybody else did. And then we opened it up for the public on St. Patrick's Day and had a really wonderful time. We did lots of little activities and had presentations for them. There's been presentations out there to chambers, city council. There's been lots of schools that have been out there. We've had over 1,000 people take tours over that year period between September and August. It was amazing. We've begun taking advantage of as much media as we can by any kind of hype that comes up. We call the newspaper and send press releases so that we can get the importance of waste reduction in front of people's eyes and the importance of recycling practices, good recycling practices. One of the ones that was really, really good that got a lot of comment in our industry was the one that was done from the North Coast Journal just a couple of months ago. That was a really good article that gave a lot of information to people that they didn't know, and I still get comments from that. We've been on TV radio. We do whatever we can, anything that comes up that we can make a big deal out of. We make sure that we take advantage of that. It's free. Some of the information that we've been able to get from our surveys of the material has helped us talk about doing updated printed and online materials. Jill came right out of the bat and got some material together, Waste Authority for all the communities to use for communicating to the people that are using the blue cans. And we also improved some of our online resources for people and some communication, even with on Recology Facebook pages. We routinely publish stuff about changes in the markets and what people can do to do better. And so does the Waste Authority. I'm sure this is just a short number of things that we've done over the years. Seems like we have somebody coming through every week. This is an example of one that happened recently. It's not part of the 1,000 people that came over, but look at all those people. Rex was there. And that was the city of Eureka came and they did the day before, it was over Veterans Day weekend. I could not believe how many people came. It was a 3-day weekend, and the city of Eureka's city council, we slowed down the sort line release for maybe to about 5 tons per hour and let them pick for a couple of minutes so they could have a personal experience of what it was like. And there was a mezzanine up in the back where people can watch, and we gave tours. We gave them pancakes for free. We gave them bamboo toothbrushes. We talked to them about alternatives to, to picking out recycling in the first place, tried to do zero waste ideas and what kinds of things are out there locally for them to get. There are alternatives to wasteful practices. We always do that. That was a really good show. And Maggie was there too. She was there with them. It was a really good event. So you want to know where our stuff is going? Well, this is kind of a pie chart of where Recology sends its material. 50% of the material that's collected in the blue can is staying domestically. I know people ask that a lot because I think with all the stuff that's out there, people who know think that things are going to China. The domestic stuff that's staying here are some plastic, but it's mainly the cardboard, glass, that kind of stuff is staying here domestically. Actually, the glass helps with some California jobs, and it stays here in California. We are probably, Humboldt County is probably the 1% that's sending it to China because we were the first ones and the only ones that were able to make the National Sword standard with the new equipment. We didn't make a big deal out of it because we're humble. But it is true that we were the first one in the state of California to be able to do that since the National Sword. The other places we go, Vietnam, Thailand, South Korea, and Myanmar. And the reason why I'm putting some of these things up, these lines are going to change probably by the next time that we talk because domestic markets are just now getting online and we're seeing more stuff on the West Coast that's going to make it more economical for us to ship things there. And I think some of these other countries are going to probably start coming online with some other things too. In the commodity markets, the other countries that are close to China are starting to take on the National Sword standards. I've included one of those articles right there is just India announces it's also going to be banning plastic scrap from coming into their country, and they should. That's just Linda Wise' opinion. So they're going to be calling on those standards too. So that's going to have, that's going to continue to have an effect to depress commodity prices. It's going to be it's not going to get any better. They're going to continue to be suppressed, and it's going to be over a very long term until we can start getting more sites reopening in the United States, and fiber is going to be the first one that's going to happen. The next thing that's going to happen with the recycling processing agreement is we're going to get a commodities analysis report. We're going to get really into the weeds to be able to talk with your staff to start getting to a point where we're going to be looking at what the recycling processing fee will be for next year. And we're going to continue to outreach based on what the materials that we're seeing, and be responsive to what we see and be real time with it. Do you have any more questions?
Well, I recall an article that was in the journal just before Christmas about Christmas wrapping paper and how that was not to be put in the recycling bin. And I thought that that was certainly well timed. That was the only place I saw it, so I don't know how widespread that information was, but.
Well, because our paper is of the quality of the ONP 8, they can't, it couldn't tolerate any paper that had any kind of coloring to it. And we kind of got notified toward, I think it was the beginning of November, that they weren't, that those paper bales were going to be rejected if they saw it, if it came overseas. So we had to scrabble until the last minute. But you are right. We need to get out in front for all kinds of waste messaging out very early before the holidays. It's difficult to get some of the airtime that people pay attention to during that time. And the way we would be getting it would be through advertisements.
Any other questions? Frank, go ahead.
I had a gentleman approach me the other night that he said when he went to dump his recycling, because he doesn't do the recycle pickup, he recycles himself. And when he took it into Fortuna, he said when he dumped it, there was different types of the plastic containers, and he brought me one with a 6 on it. And he was told by whoever was there, that was the employee, that they didn't want certain types like that. And so in the past, we've gone back and forth that only the 1 and the 2s were sellable, but then you said, no, go ahead and put the 6s in.
Well,
Where do we stand on that?
well, when you're doing your own drop-off, has a different sensitivity than what we're putting into the curbside. There are, even that 1 through the numbers on those plastic recycling, I tell people it's sort of like a zip code. There, underneath that number, there are a whole thousands of different kinds of plastics underneath that number, and it's almost to the point that that number doesn't mean anything anymore. So a water bottle is numbered the same as those plastic clamshells. And if we're trying to communicate at drop-offs, we want to get the highest value material there. We'll communicate if people are bringing in that we don't want that. But when we're picking up at the curbside, it's just too confusing for curbside customers to be able to figure out what kind of plastic, which number 1 is okay and which one isn't. Right now, what we're trying to concentrate on is just 3 messages. We want people to clean out their containers, and we want people to not bag their materials, and we don't want people to put wishful recycling in there, things like clothing and electronics and like car parts, that kind of stuff. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to concentrate on right now with the curbside. What you're talking about is only going to be addressed through state policy, because it's just gone rampant. State or government policy, it's gone rampant. There's no regulations over what kind of number people put on those things. Those chasing arrows.
So with respect to like Paul Newman's dressing bottle, do you think people are just lazy, or do you think they think it's plastic, it's recyclable, goes into the bin?
I think, okay, this is what I think. I think that there's an assumption that there's some sort of mechanism or a person that's emptying it out and cleaning it. And I don't think that they see it magnified. To once you put all those in there, they don't see what the effect of the magnification of that is. That's why I think it's really important for people to go and look.
Yes.
I think that's, so it's, they don't see, just this little bit isn't going to hurt, but if everybody's doing it, it hurts.
Yeah. And then with the glass, you said the glass was clean, so if there's a glass bottle with residue, contaminant material in it, does that get cleaned and it becomes recyclable as opposed to residuals?
Well, what's happening is because of the flowy, shaky process that the paper and the plastic is going off into a different direction. It's not getting into the glass. So when it gets taken to the next processor, it doesn't have to go through another decontamination. There's not as much residual involved in that. But the way that the process works is it's mostly glass.
So in terms of the contamination, the numbers we saw were obviously very far from our aspirational goal of 8%. But you also did share an example of how, with doing some outreach in Eureka, you were able to get those numbers down. What is the plan looking like for the next year? Like, what are the goals that Recology is setting, or with HWMA setting, to start getting those numbers down for contamination?
I think what we're doing is we're all continuing to have conversations with your staff to see how we can address that through messaging. We just had a meeting today.
And it's actually more than HWMA and Recology. We are reliant on member agency staff in working to work with Recology in identifying those neighborhoods that are inherently problematic, and the development of some new oopsie tags. And so here I want to give a shout out to Donna out in the back of the room here. She and her team have basically redesigned the oopsie tag, that if somebody is putting material which is unacceptable and it's being identified by the Recology driver, then the Recology driver is able to place a tag. The tag is not live yet, right? And we took a look at it today, and great graphics. They're very clean. They're using the same icons that we had placed in ours. They're just blown up more. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and they'll be able to get out into the route and actually have that direct contact with that, bin, if you will. And, it really is going to be education, step by step, neighborhood by neighborhood, and we need to have the involvement of each of the member agencies and your staff in helping us to identify, what is going to work for your particular community. In addition, we're talking about how we can be better standardizing all of the language. That's one of the things that's really great about the city of Eureka taking the initiative around developing this tag and sharing with all of the member agency staff today that were present at the local task force meeting, and saying, should we be using this in a regional level? And around the table, people were like, yeah, we should be using this. So I think now we're starting to see that there's an opportunity to be working more regionally in terms of how we're getting our messages out to the community so that we can start getting those numbers reduced. And really, it's just taking every opportunity we can to talk about contamination and finding ways to reduce it.
Yeah, and as far as talking with the staff, of the member agencies, beyond that, what we have to make a decision is, do you want us to leave the cans if they're contaminated?
Right.
Are we going to go further and charge people to pick them up as garbage? Those are the conversations that are going to go on further from here.
And that, of course, will be a jurisdiction to Recology conversation, not so
Right,
much
right.
HWMA. We want to make sure that we're not, stepping inadvertently on toes.
Yeah, it's hard to keep the lines from being blurred. And that's all I have.
Any
Yep.
other questions or comments? Very good. Linda, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll see what we can do to get that contamination level down.
Okay, well, I'll help with any way I can.
Michael? Yes.
I would suggest for any of the, anybody up here, if they can organize what was done out there on the zero waste and things like that. It was actually a pretty amazing thing. Give me the number on how many the average person uses for hair shampoo bottles in a lifetime.
880 shampoo bottles a person uses in their lifetime. And 10,000, population of 10,000, that's 8 million shampoo bottles. That's like my favorite statistic too. But you can buy shampoo in a powder and refill your bottles or use a bar. You know, those are things that people we're going to have to let people have it. Get a habit.
And the other one is she's got me using toothpaste tablets
Yeah.
because the tubes are unrecyclable.
Yeah.
So unless you can figure out it, yeah. And
Yeah.
so you get a tablet, you pop the tablet, and it becomes paste, and it just
Yeah.
comes in a.
Where do you
And
get
then,
those?
and then the
Eureka Natural Foods.
Eureka Natural Foods.
Oh,
And then
and other places probably.
the other, and then it's just, it was kind of amazing but the response from everybody was pretty amazing.
Yeah. It can be overwhelming.
Maggie, did you have something you wanted to add to this conversation?
Just a question. I'll take the short one. Several slides back, you had glass, like 3 or 4 main material types.
This one.
Oh, it's the one that's on.
Price is right.
Okay. You had several different material types, but glass, thank you. Glass wasn't one of them. Or, excuse me, plastic. And this is one of the evil ones that we all are having a million different problems with. Glass is heavy, tons per, out of the landfill and in our measurements. And plastic is very lightweight and very problematic environmentally and in your system and everything. You haven't said much at all, except for the discussion about the problems of plastics.
Thank you for the question. The reason why I didn't list it on that list is because where we bid and where we're going to be looking at is a confidential document, and I only put in a couple of general examples. So we also have some variances in those areas either. It's not that it's not important. I was giving that as an example of where there's some sensitivities.
So under the rate assumptions that we made in the development of this document, it will, we're going to be doing the same evaluation, and we're going to be looking at this material. So it's actually as it relates to the rate discussions that we're going to have, not the importance or unimportance, as it may be seen, of the individual material types. All the materials are really important. But this is actually for our discussions as we move forward with the rates and some of the assumptions that we had made initially about a year and a half ago, and some adjustments plus or minus that we will likely see. At the time that we had our conversations through our negotiation process, for example, mixed paper was really low. Recology's system improvements and the ability to get that material into market is going to see an uptick. So we'll see a correction and a revision as far as that particular material type. So that didn't exist when we had the conversation. And likewise, other materials were estimated to be higher, and it looks like the actual composition percentage is lower. So we'll be going through those one by one. So it's really specific. That slide was specific to the rate that we're going to be having conversations around.
Right.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you again, Linda.
Sure.
The next item on our agenda is board member reports. Does any board member have any report to share? Frank, you want to start? Elaine?
Nothing from Blue Lake, no.
Sophia?
No report.
Yes, I have nothing to report. Okay. No board member reports this evening. And last on the agenda is the executive director's report.
So I have a couple of items. One is that, everything is written here. I'm prepared to answer any sort of questions that you may have. I do just want to note that we're having some challenges up at the landfill with different holes that we've seen developing for a variety of reasons. But we're spending considerable time right now with rodents and then having some neighborhood dogs getting onto the site, and then they start digging after the rodents, and then it rains, and a bigger hole opens up. So right now we have about 50 holes. We have notified the regional board as well as the county LEA, and one of our proposals is, rather than us preparing a work plan to be reviewed and approved by the regulatory agencies in order for us to go fill these larger holes, can we just develop basically a protocol that is going to be approved so that, you know, we've got just a set way of approaching it. So we're working on that right now. We also have another one that was a result of some erosion alongside of a culvert that was larger. We're not going to be able to address that until the weather dries out. But just to let you know that in terms of some of the ongoing activities at the landfill, I realize the landfill is closed. One would think all we have to do is monitoring. There's actually ongoing, maintenance activities that we're going to have to be doing up there just by virtue of the site kind of nature. The other thing I want to let you know is that the AB 939 local task force met this morning. It was a really good meeting, and I think they're going to try to be a little bit more engaged around this quarterly meeting and seeing the importance of being working together from a regional perspective. It seemed to kind of take a little while to get their feet underneath them, but it sounds like there's considerable interest around that. Just as a note for the Burn Ash site, which has been just an ongoing topic of conversation for almost 8 years now, one of our requirements was to do 5 years of mitigation and monitoring, vegetation monitoring, in addition to some debris cleanup. As of December, we are now completely finished with that project. The final report was submitted, and we can finally sort of move on from that one. Waste characterization report, which was approved by the board in October. We are going to be kicking off the first season of sampling in February 3rd through the 11th. We had a slight change. Rather than doing the audits at all of the transfer stations, all material is going to be coming down to our facility, so our director of operations is going to be making some room so that those trucks will all be routed down to HWMA's facility and being audited there. So it'll reduce some of the costs that's associated with mobilizing the auditing teams, and it will help to just standardize how material is coming in and being sorted. The city of Fortuna reached out yesterday. We've been playing tag since July or August on this, and they are also interested in participating now with this effort. So I'll be circling back with Merritt so we can work out some of the finer details as well as with Linda. I am going to, just to let board members know, we don't have a meeting in February, and that's been part of our schedule. We are moving forward with the development of our budget, and this year we're looking at scrutinizing very closely our existing fee schedules. So you'll probably see a different conversation than we've had in the past, because normally that's a pretty routine review, approve. We're going to be bringing forward some options for the board to consider as part of those special materials. I would like to ask Eric Keller-Heckman, our Director of Operations, to come up and just talk a little bit about our new program that the board approved in October.
Good evening, Board. So as Jill alluded to, starting January 3rd, we expanded our household hazardous waste reuse program. So in years past, we have offered latex paint for reuse to all residents that come into our facility. We've now expanded that on Fridays from 9 to 3 only as of right now. You can come in and reuse any products pretty much that we accept at our hazardous waste facility. So if you find it under your sink, in your shed, in your garage, anything like that, you can now come in, and as long as it's been dropped off in a light container, it's over 50% full, it's offered for reuse now. So Fridays, 9 to 3.
Thank you. I think there's
Wait a
question
second.
here.
Do we, so it's a sealed container, but like on paint, do we verify that it's,
It's not
What-
sealed containers. If they
No,
are
no,
partially
excuse me, but not
Yeah.
sealed, but
original.
which means do you look at it to make sure it's what it
Absolutely.
is? to be
Yeah, so
everything for
every
liability?
item that comes into our hazardous waste facility is physically handled by our hazmat technicians, and gone through, and it has to meet a certain set of standards before it's allowed for reuse to the public. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And that concludes my report.
And that concludes this meeting. Thank you all for coming.